Vincent Russo owned 4 upscale Italian restaurants across Providence, and for 9 years he had built his culinary empire on the backs of workers who could not fight back. Every food critic praised his authentic dishes, every business magazine celebrated his success story, every customer left glowing reviews about the exceptional service and reasonable prices. But what those customers did not know was that every affordable meal they enjoyed was made possible by workers earning $3 per hour, working 16-hour shifts, sleeping in basement storage rooms, and living in constant fear that one complaint would result in deportation. Vincent Russo had perfected a simple business model: hire undocumented immigrants, pay them almost nothing, threaten them with ICE if they complained, and pocket the difference between what he should have paid and what he actually paid. But here is what Vincent Russo forgot. Labor investigators eventually find the truth. Exploited workers eventually find courage. And when desperate people finally speak up, the evidence they provide can destroy even the most celebrated restaurateur. What you are about to witness is not just a trial, it is the complete exposure of a man who built success on human suffering. The moment when Vincent Russo realizes his empire of exploitation is collapsing will be absolutely devastating. So if you have watched this far, do not miss the end. Like the video and dive into the story, because this confrontation between predatory greed and unwavering justice will leave you speechless. It is Thursday morning, 9:30 a.m. sharp, at the Providence Municipal Court. The courtroom is filled with former workers, labor advocates, and immigration attorneys. 23 people sit in the gallery, some nervous, others determined, all waiting to see if the man who exploited them will finally face consequences. And there, at the defendant's table, sits Vincent Russo in an expensive Italian suit, his expression suggesting he views this as an inconvenience rather than a reckoning. The bailiff's voice cuts through the tension. The state of Rhode Island versus Vincent Anthony Russo. Judge Caprio looks down from his bench with an expression that suggests he has already reviewed hundreds of pages of labor violations and witness testimony. Mr. Russo, you stand accused of wage theft, labor trafficking, housing code violations, fraud, and intimidation of witnesses. These charges involve 23 workers across 4 restaurants over a period of 9 years. How do you respond? Russo stands with practiced composure, his voice smooth and confident. Your Honor, I appreciate the opportunity to address what I believe are serious misunderstandings about the restaurant industry and immigration employment. When we examine the full context of how immigrant workers are employed in hospitality, it will become clear that I operated within industry standards. Judge Caprio's eyebrow raises. Industry standards, Mr. Russo, the charges allege you paid workers as little as $3 per hour, while federal minimum wage is $7.25. You housed workers in restaurant basements with no heat or proper sanitation. You threatened workers with deportation if they complained. What industry standards permit that? Russo's tone remains calm. Your Honor, the restaurant business operates on thin margins. When I hire workers who have no legal documentation, I am taking significant risks. The compensation reflects that risk. These workers understood the arrangement when they accepted employment. Judge Caprio leans forward. The arrangement? Mr. Russo, you exploited vulnerable people who had no other options. That is not an arrangement. That is exploitation. For the first time, irritation crosses Russo's face. Your Honor, I gave these people jobs when no one else would. I provided housing, meals, and opportunities. Without me, they would have nothing. Subscribe to Judge Stories if you believe restaurant owners who exploit vulnerable workers deserve maximum punishment. Judge Caprio picks up a thick folder. Provided housing? Mr. Russo, let us discuss the housing you provided. According to building inspectors, you converted the basement of your flagship restaurant into sleeping quarters for 12 workers. There were no windows, no proper ventilation, no heat in winter. Workers slept on mattresses on a concrete floor. There was one bathroom for 12 people. The space was infested with rodents and mold. You charged each worker $200 per month to live there. Is that accurate? Russo shifts slightly. The housing was basic but functional. Workers knew the conditions before they moved in. Basic but functional? Mr. Russo, the Providence Health Department condemned that space as unfit for human habitation. You are housing workers in conditions that violate every building and safety code, and you charge them money for the privilege of living in a basement filled with mold and rats. Your Honor, immigrant workers often come from countries where living conditions are much worse. They were grateful for what I provided. Grateful? Mr. Russo, let us hear from one of your workers. Maria Santos worked in your kitchen for 4 years. Let me read her testimony. Judge Caprio begins reading. I came to America hoping to build a better life. Mr. Russo hired me to work in his kitchen. He said he would pay me $8 per hour and provide housing. When I arrived, everything changed. He said because I had no papers, he could only pay me $3 per hour. He said I should be grateful because other places would not hire me at all. I worked from 6 in the morning until midnight, 7 days per week. I lived in a basement with 11 other workers. There was no heat. In winter, we could see our breath. The ceiling leaked when it rained. There were rats everywhere. When I asked Mr. Russo about the pay, he said if I complained, he would call immigration. I was terrified. I had a daughter back home depending on the money I sent, so I stayed silent and kept working. The courtroom sits in heavy silence. Russo's face has tightened, but he maintains his composure. Judge Caprio continues. Mr. Russo, Maria Santos worked 16-hour days, 7 days per week for 4 years at $3 per hour. She should have earned approximately $200,000 at minimum wage. You paid her approximately $62,000 total. You stole $138,000 from one worker alone. How do you justify that? Russo's voice takes on a defensive edge. Your Honor, Maria knew the wages when she accepted the job. She could have left at any time. Left to go where, Mr. Russo? You controlled her housing, her income, her immigration status. You threatened her with deportation. Where exactly could she go? She could have found another job, Your Honor. The fact that she stayed for 4 years proves she believed it was a good situation. A good situation? Mr. Russo, she stayed because you trapped her. You made her dependent on you and then used that dependence to exploit her labor. Judge Caprio picks up another document. Let us discuss Carlos Mendoza. He worked at your restaurant for 6 years. According to his testimony, you not only underpaid him, but also confiscated his passport. True or false? Russo's jaw tightens. I held documents for safekeeping. Many workers asked me to keep their papers secure. For safekeeping? Mr. Russo, Carlos testified that when he asked for his passport back, you refused. You told him that if he quit or complained, you would destroy his documents and report him to immigration. That is not safekeeping. That is holding someone hostage. Your Honor, that is Carlos's interpretation. I was protecting valuable documents. Protecting them from whom? From Carlos himself? Mr. Russo, you confiscated identity documents to prevent workers from leaving. That is a federal crime called labor trafficking. Russo's hands clench. I am not a trafficker. I ran restaurants. These workers came to me voluntarily. They came to you seeking employment, and you trapped them in forced labor. Let me tell you what else investigators found. You required workers to purchase their uniforms from a company you owned. Those uniforms cost $150 each. Workers had to buy new ones quarterly. You deducted the cost from their already illegal wages. You also charged workers for meals, even though federal law requires employers to provide meals to food service workers free of charge. You charged them for cleaning supplies, for broken dishes, for customer complaints. You created a system where workers earned almost nothing while you extracted money from every aspect of their lives. Russo's voice rises. Running a restaurant is expensive. I had costs to cover. Costs? Mr. Russo, your restaurant's generated over $8 million in revenue over a new 9 years. You own 2 luxury vehicles, a vacation home, and investment properties. You did not have a cost problem, you had a greed problem. Judge Caprio leans back. Let me read another testimony. This is from Elena Rodriguez, who worked for you for 3 years. She writes, when my son got sick, I asked Mr. Russo for 1 day off to take him to the hospital. He said if I missed work, I would be fired and reported to immigration. I brought my sick child to the restaurant and kept him in the storage room while I worked my shift. My son had a fever of 103 degrees. He needed a doctor, but I was too afraid to lose my job. Mr. Russo saw my son in the storage room and told me that if I brought family problems to work again, I would be terminated. My son recovered eventually, but I will never forgive myself for choosing work over his health, and I will never forgive Mr. Russo for putting me in that position. The courtroom is completely silent. Several people in the gallery are crying quietly. Judge Caprio's voice cuts through the emotion. Mr. Russo, Elena Rodriguez was so afraid of you that she brought her feverish child to work and kept him in a storage room rather than risk being deported. What kind of employer creates that level of fear? Russo looks down. I needed reliable workers. I could not have people missing shifts. Reliable workers? Mr. Russo, you terrorized vulnerable people into working through illness, injury, and family emergencies. You treated human beings like machines that existed only to generate profit for you. Judge Caprio picks up a recording device. Mr. Russo, investigators placed an undercover agent in one of your restaurants. That agent recorded conversations between you and your workers. Let us listen to one of those recordings. The courtroom falls silent as audio begins playing. Russo's recorded voice is cold and threatening. Listen carefully. I know some of you have been talking about wages and conditions. Let me make something very clear. I pay what I pay. If you do not like it, there are 20 people waiting to take your job. And if anyone goes to authorities or lawyers, I will personally call ICE and make sure you are deported before you can testify. Your families back home depend on the money you send. If you get deported, they starve. Think about that before you complain. The recording ends. The courtroom sits in stunned silence. Judge Caprio's voice is quiet but firm. Mr. Russo, you just heard yourself explicitly threaten vulnerable workers with deportation if they reported your crimes. How do you explain this? Russo's face has gone pale. Your Honor, I was frustrated. Workers were complaining about things they agreed to when they took the jobs. Agreed to? Mr. Russo, they agreed to exploitation because you gave them no other option. You targeted the most vulnerable people you could find and then used their vulnerability as a weapon against them. Judge Caprio takes a deep breath. Vincent Russo, you built a successful restaurant empire by systematically exploiting people who could not defend themselves. You paid starvation wages. You housed workers in condemned conditions. You confiscated documents. You threatened deportation. You created a system of modern servitude where workers had no power, no voice, and no hope. Russo's composure finally breaks. Your Honor, please, I am not a bad person. I gave these people opportunities. Yes, the wages were low, but I provided jobs. Without me, they would have nothing. Without you, they would have dignity. Without you, they would not have worked 16-hour days for $3 per hour. Without you, they would not have lived in basements with rats. You did not give them opportunities. You stole their labor and their humanity. Judge Caprio's voice becomes firm. For wage theft totaling approximately $3.2 million across 23 workers, I am imposing a sentence of 8 years in federal prison. For labor trafficking, an additional 5 years. For housing code violations that endangered lives, an additional 2 years. Your sentences will run consecutively for a total of 15 years in federal custody. The courtroom erupts. Russo staggers backward. 15 years, Your Honor? I am 58 years old. I will be 73 when I get out. This is too harsh. Too harsh? Mr. Russo, Maria Santos will never recover the years she spent working for $3 per hour. Carlos Mendoza will never get back the time he worked while you held his passport hostage. Elena Rodriguez will never forget keeping her sick child in a storage room because you terrorized her. Your 15 years is nothing compared to what you took from them. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution of $3.2 million in stolen wages plus penalties, totaling approximately $5 million. All 4 of your restaurants are subject to immediate closure and asset seizure. You are permanently barred from operating any food service business or employing workers in any capacity, and you will serve your sentence in federal prison, where you will have 15 years to reflect on what it means to treat people as property rather than human beings. Russo collapses into his chair, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume. The bailiffs move forward with handcuffs. Judge Caprio delivers his final words. Vincent Russo, you stood before this court acting like you were a benevolent employer who gave opportunities to people others would not hire. But you were never benevolent. You were a predator who targeted the vulnerable and exploited their desperation for profit. You stole their labor, their dignity, and their humanity. You threatened them into silence and treated their suffering as acceptable business expenses. Today you learn that no amount of success justifies human exploitation. Every worker deserves dignity, fair wages, and safe conditions. When you violate those basic principles, you are not just breaking the law, you are betraying our shared humanity. Within hours, labor advocates celebrate the verdict. The seized restaurants are being investigated by new owners committed to fair labor practices. Maria, Carlos, Elena, and 20 others receive notification of restitution payments. Immigration attorneys work to secure legal status for workers who testified. Sometimes the most important lesson about success comes from watching someone who built an empire on exploitation discover that human dignity cannot be bought, sold, or violated for profit. Vincent Russo walked into that courtroom in his expensive suit, ready to explain away his crimes as industry standards. He walked out in handcuffs, headed to 15 years in prison, his restaurant seized, his reputation destroyed, where he will have plenty of time to reflect on the difference between building a business and building a prison for desperate people. If you enjoyed this story and believe exploitative employers deserve maximum punishment, please like and subscribe to this channel. Check out the other stories where justice catches up with those who treated human beings as disposable resources. See you in the next video. Stay healthy.